Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. Hatred is a terrible thing, and yet humans hate other humans all of the time. And there are all sorts of reasons that people hate each other, but oftentimes when you boil it all down, it amounts to pride. Cain hated Abel because Abel's sacrifice, offered in faith, was accepted by God, while his, not offered in faith, was not accepted. Cain was proud of his sacrifice, but God was not pleased. Cain's pride turned to anger and hatred towards Abel, which led to murder. In the book of Esther, we have Haman, whose pride was wounded by Mordecai refusing to bow down to him. That Haman not only hated Mordecai, but the entire Jewish nation too, because it was their religion that said that only Jehovah could be worshipped. What would Haman do about it? Let's find out. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to the book of Esther, to Esther chapter 3. We're going to be reading from verses 7 through 15. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Esther chapter 3, beginning verse 7. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman to decide the day and the month, until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all your provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you. Do to them as seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus it was written, and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, and they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Haman needs to convince Ahasuerus to have the Jews exterminated. But he can't just go to Ahasuerus to do this. He needed a reason. And it can't just be that Mordecai wouldn't bow down to me. So he did sit down and think of something that would be convincing, and then had lots cast before him to determine the timing he would tell Ahasuerus that this should be done. A lot was a means of making a decision, and was done with dice, pieces of wood, slips of paper, or other things. When done at the command of God, it has been used to determine the will of the Lord, though other religions did that too, even though their gods were false. The current month was Nisan, the first month of the year, corresponding to our mid-March, early April, the month of the Jewish Passover. In fact, this was the 13th day of the month, the day before the Passover, when the Jews who observed this feast would be clearing their house of leaven. When the lots were cast, the day of the month fell on the 13th, and the month was the month of Adar, the 12th month of the year, corresponding to our late February, early March. So with the plan and reasoning now set, and the time now set, Haman sought an audience with the king to inform him of this plan. And the way Haman framed this plan was as a threat to Ahasuerus' authority and the Persian rule. Remember, not too long before, Ahasuerus had a plot against him to assassinate him, so he might easily have been receptive to prevent another test to his authority. Haman described a people who were scattered and dispersed among the Persian Empire, which included Palestine and Judea, that have different laws than the Persians. This was true because the law of Moses was different to the Persian law, especially around worship to only Jehovah. Haman then went and said that because of this, these people don't keep the king's law. Now that is an exaggeration to say the least. As long as the king's law didn't go against the law of Moses, we have not seen the Jews breaking the king's law. On the contrary, the Jews seem to have on more than one occasion being more deferential to the king's law than the law of Moses. Think of the stopping of the rebuilding of the temple in the days of Smerdis and Cambyses. Haman left out the specific laws that they broke, instead choosing to imply that they broke all of the king's laws. Now, of course, the king should have inquired more, but he didn't. He accepted the word of his prime minister and asked Haman what should be done. Haman said that they should all be killed, and it should be done by the king's decree. In fact, Haman said that he would pay 10,000 talents of silver, likely as a way to pay for the lost revenue to the king that would come by losing the tax money of the now dead Jews. If the talent talked about here is the talent that we see elsewhere in the Old Testament, which weighs about 34 kilograms or 75 pounds, then the value of this money in 2025 American dollars would be about 34,400, and in Canadian would be about 49,400. That doesn't sound like a lot of money to most of our ears, but at that time, 10,000 talents of silver was a lot of money. This saying pleased the king, so the king gave Haman his signet ring in order for him to draft the decree and have it signed. Ahasuerus also told Haman that any of the plunder that was gotten from this would be his to do with what he pleased. That would be quite a windfall for Haman, one that would theoretically far exceed the 10,000 talents of silver that he pledged to the king. And so the decree went out in the 12th year of Ahasuerus, king of Persia, meaning it was about 5 years after Esther became queen, that all the Jews would be annihilated, both young and old, little children and women, and that this would be done in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, meaning 11 months later. This gap gave time for the decree to travel to the entire empire, but it also gave the Jews time to prepare, and one Jew in particular would prepare indeed, attempting to use all at his disposal to stop this plan. When the command went out, naturally it perplexed the people, for even though the Jews had enemies, it seemed odd that the king would wipe out a people that didn't openly attack the empire. And it probably frightened some of the other ethnic races, for if Ahasuerus did this to the Jews, would they be next? We're going to find out the response by one Jew in particular, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Esther chapter 4, verses 1 to 9, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.